So it looks like we've sort of settled on about 74, 75 people who are participating in this. And we're just so excited that everyone is able to join us this evening. That this is something that we've done for a little while. And we're so glad for us to be able to meet with you to look at know your numbers, know your value, and to hear from our alums that can talk about the job seeking phase, the recruitment phase that you'll go through, how to present the types of backgrounds that you have, the assets that you have, and the great education that you've gotten from VUSN. I am so glad to be able to introduce everyone and for you to have a great evening. I look forward to the presentations that you're going to hear from our alums. And I encourage you to ask the questions that you want. I know you'll use the chat box function to be able to communicate and ask questions. So I am now going to turn it over to our alumni group and look forward to what you come up with today and to all the exciting things that you're going to gain from this presentation. So I'm going to say goodbye to you and look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Hannah Lowe, and I'm the president of the Alumni Association here at the VUSN. We're thrilled that you're with us this evening, and we're going to get started in just a moment with a video. And we just really want to encourage this year, really thinking outside the box as you're looking for jobs. And we wanted to offer an opportunity to think about video interviewing. So I'll let Sarah start the video.
As more employers make video interviewing a standard part of their hiring process, we've put together some tips to help yours go without a hitch. Your interview may not be happening in person, but you still have to prepare. Research the company, practice answering some common interview questions, and have a few questions of your own for your interviewer. Cut down on technical difficulties by doing a test run with a friend ahead of time. Make sure the sound and image are clear, familiarize yourself with the program you'll be using, and check your internet connection. Create a good impression with video framing. Set up in front of a neutral background like a plain wall or an uncluttered room. Sit facing your light source. Natural light is best. Although it might feel strange, you should dress just as professionally as you would if it were an in-person interview. And don't slouch. Sitting up straight can also help you feel more energized. Open the program you're using a few minutes early to give yourself time to relax and check your shot. When you meet your interviewer, it's okay to say if you're not familiar with video interviews. Acknowledging how things are different helps break the ice. In video interviews, you have to rely on facial expressions to show you're engaged. Nod and smile when you're listening, and avoid vocalizing your agreement, which can mute the other person's microphone. Finish your answers with a nod or ask a question to signal that you're done speaking. Follow these tips and you'll be set up for success for your next virtual interview. Good luck and happy job hunting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just to give you a little bit of a rundown, we're so thrilled that you're with us this evening. We have an excellent panel, and I'm going to introduce them. And we would also love for you to hang around at the end of the panel. We'd like to talk about next steps, networking opportunities, things of that nature. So be sure to stick around. But it's my honor to introduce our amazing panel that we have brought together this evening. First, I have Asa Briggs, and I'm going to allow each of them to discuss their background. Next, we have Eteriel Burrell. We have Bernard Williams and Angela Wilson Liverman, if she was able to make it. So Asa, would you like to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Certainly. Good evening. My name is Dr. Asa T. Briggs, and I am excited to be a part of this panel tonight. I am a graduate of the VUSN program, class of 2012. I was a Psych NP student and a graduate of that program. And so currently, my role is the program director of Rural Psychiatric Services for Prisma Health Upstate. And so in my current role, I am actually responsible for the integration of psychiatric services within the primary care model. So I'm excited to be here with you guys tonight and to give you some, hopefully, some helpful tips on how to get the job of your dreams.
Awesome. And Eteriel, would you go next?
Sure. My name's Eteriel. I am a graduate of the Women's Health Program at VUSN, class of 2013. I have been working both in the role as a clinician, and I have worked as a clinic manager. Currently working still as a clinician at the Metro Public Health Department here in Nashville, Tennessee. I have had a few jobs since graduation, so I'm seasoned in the interviewing process. So I am happy to answer any questions. There isn't a question that's too unusual, and I am so glad to be a part of this panel today.
Thank you so much. And Bernard, would you go next?
Sure. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining tonight, and definitely a pleasure to be here as a representative of Premise Health, which is a large employer health company. We provide employee health to companies all across the country, and I'm one of the recruiters. So if you were applying for a position with us, I'd probably speak to you regarding our opportunities. I've been in nurse practitioner recruiting for probably the past 10 years or so, and worked for another company prior to joining Premise Health. And so I have at least an idea for what some employers look for in terms of the experience and such. So welcome, and I'll be very happy to discuss it tonight.
Wonderful. And did Dr. Wilson Liverman join the call? All right. So what we'll go ahead and do is open our panel up to some discussions that have become important through questions that we received, and we're very thankful. So I would like to start with what's it like to be out of school as a new nurse practitioner. So one of the best questions, I think, in building what networking and resumes look like is, what are ways for students to build their resumes, especially those without nursing experience?
I can speak to that.
Sure.
I was actually a non-nursing student. Prior to my time at VUSN, I was actually an account executive for an IT company. And so one of the things that I think helped me as a new graduate was I was able to sell the opportunities and the experiences that I'd had outside of nursing. And so I was looking for opportunities for leadership as well as clinical work. And so I was able to parlay my time as an account executive in terms of my communication skills and in terms of my ability to interface with customers and clients from my previous experiences in information technology. And so what I was able to do is I was able to align some of those transferable concepts and transferable skills into my clinical work as a nurse. And so within the first year and a half of clinical practice, I was actually appointed as the director of psychiatry for one of the largest federally qualified health centers in Washington, D.C., because I was able to utilize the experiences that I had outside of nursing. And I was able to augment that and sort of get the job that I wanted in terms of leadership and clinical skills. So there's nothing that is wasted in terms of your experiences and your skill set. Just look at those things as transferable concepts into whatever industry you'd like to find yourself in and developing expertise, and just use that for your advantage. Because a lot of times companies are looking for your non-traditional candidate. So they want individuals who not only have had experiences in nursing, but maybe other fields of study, because it makes the clinical experience, I think, in my humble opinion, more richer and a more diverse experience for not only the employee, but the employer as well.
I want to piggyback kind of off of what Asa said. You know, one of the things I've said on interview panels at the health department, and sometimes we're looking for a clinician, but sometimes we're looking for additional skills that is not something that is covered in nursing school. For instance, we were looking for someone who was also bilingual. You know, so add those skills on your resume if you have those, any additional certifications in any other areas. And also, say you don't have those specific, any other particular skill set outside of nursing, or you feel that you might not be able to market it well, market what you've learned at Vanderbilt. I know as a women's health nurse practitioner, when I was looking for a job fresh out of school, I was nervous because I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone's like women's health NPs, it's so difficult to find a job. And one thing that I did do is include on my resume, you know, specific skills I learned at Vanderbilt, like IUD insertions or, you know, endometrial biopsies, these skills that you might say, oh, that's just something that I needed to know, you know, for the program. No, some employers are like, hey, you know, that's amazing that person, I don't have to teach that person how to do this specific skill. Add those additional skills on your resume, and you have to learn how to market yourself, and don't downplay all of the things that you have been taught at Vanderbilt, because they do an awesome job at preparing us for the workforce.
Yeah, and I'd like to say too, definitely what you're saying in terms of capitalize on those skills. So when you're preparing your resume, you know, highlight anything that's outside of the ordinary in your clinicals, anything that you were able to, you know, that, you know, a supervising or preceptor allowed you to do, you know, really capitalize on those things. So those are, like, there's key things that I might look for just in terms of experience in any employer for that matter, that sometimes during the interview they come out, but yet they're not listed. And sometimes you might think, oh, I don't want to put too much on my resume, but any clinical experience you have is definitely goes a long way. And I look for it, even, you know, even if someone is a new nurse practitioner, I'm still looking at what they did as a registered nurse, because that builds upon their skill as a nurse practitioner. But definitely capitalize on whatever you do in your clinical rotations, and really highlight anything that speaks to any special skills you might have or anything like that. So definitely.
Yeah. Yep. And I would even also add cultural competency. So even if you have not done a lot of work in the clinical space, but you've traveled extensively, or you have been in a study abroad program, that's one of the things that those are soft skills that you can't really teach in a clinical setting. If you've been in other cultures, or you've been traveling, you like Atiriel said, you know another language. The population health is so important, and understanding cultural backgrounds and sort of things of that nature are also things that are important for employers, because they want to know that regardless of who walks through the clinic doors, you're prepared to engage with those patients. And so even something as maybe you think is insignificant as travel or study abroad, those things are very important to employers, especially with the population health model of care.
These were excellent answers. And I was a pre-specialty student at Vanderbilt and graduated in 2014. So I definitely hear the questions that we're talking about. And I think I love these answers. I would just add, if you're able, one thing that Vanderbilt offers is the ability to work at Shade Tree Clinic. I know things are different with COVID, and there, it doesn't have to be Shade Tree. It could be another clinic at the time that you're allowed to go in. I spent extra time, for example, at Metro Health Department, and that really helped beef up my resume, to be honest. And so initiating those kinds of connections, and we're going to really kind of speak to in a little bit the opportunities to network with Vanderbilt graduates, which is just so key. So another great question was, what are some red flags and things that you would actually look for in an applicant? So kind of the red flags that might be, oh, that's not good, or that could be a concern, versus the really positive things. And I know we've hit a little bit on that, but does anybody want to take that question?
Sure, I'll start with that. For us, now again, I should mention Premise Health is an employee health company. So a lot of times we're looking for a specific skill set. But from past experience, a lot of times if there's a lot of job hopping, and that's okay if you have it, but really be prepared to give good explanation as to why you left one position for another. And you know, there's people that I speak to and they just say, look, it was an opportunity in advancement. That's why, you know, I didn't stay with this particular position, or they wanted to build a different skill set. But really be prepared to think about like how you're going to answer that question in terms of having multiple positions over a short period of time. So that's one thing but in terms of, again, I always say capitalize on whatever experience you have, definitely, but just in terms of the interview process, for sure, be prepared to answer those questions and answer why you left one position to go to another one. But yeah, that's basically it for me. I mean, and for the one thing I do want to mention too, in terms of the resume and applying for different jobs, you definitely want to do a cover letter, especially as a new graduate, because then that shapes where you want to be. And you can, in that cover letter, you can explain, you know, what your goals are. And it doesn't have to be long, but for me, sometimes when I look at a resume and I see a new graduate, I'm like, okay, what do they really want to do? And then I think, okay, now I need to reach out to them to talk to them about this. But when I see that cover letter, I'm like, oh, it sums it up. You know, it just sums it up for me, especially yeah, I'll just leave that because there's another question that I was going to answer that what I see is another question later, but that speaks to like moving and trying to move to a different state or something like that. And I'll speak to that later. But definitely the cover letter is helpful when applying for jobs as well.
I kind of wanted to mention that I've been on both sides of interviewing. And one of the things as an interviewer that I think is a red flag is when the person who's sitting in front of you don't know what they're sitting there for. You know, they haven't done their research. I mean, most companies or programs have something on the World Wide Web at this point, but knowing what you're walking into, and granted, you're not supposed to know everything about a company, but you know, you're interviewing for an STD clinic and you're surprised that you might have to understand CDC guidelines, or I don't know specifically, but just not doing the research about the position that you want, that you're applying to. And I know as a new grad that there, with the anticipation of I need to find a job, that you might just want to throw something out there. But employers are looking for a good fit, not just a warm body. They're looking for someone who will mesh well with the population that they serve, that'll mesh well with the other employees, who understand the mission of the company, and could be a model of that. So one red flag for me is that if you don't have even a rudimentary understanding of what you're applying for, what you're interviewing for.
No, that's a very good,
Yep.
that's a very good point, because actually, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's one of the first questions that I ask is, you know, what do you know about our company? And sometimes people say, I have no idea. And I'm like, that just unfortunately sets the whole, you know, my mindset has changed, because I'm thinking, you know, you're applying for a job and you didn't take the time to at least, I mean, just our basic website to see what we do specifically. So that's definitely a good point.
And I think to add to that is, in an effort to sell yourself, don't be so verbose in your writing or even in your presentation. I think, you know, one of the things that you really want to look at is look at your resume as a representation of you and who you are before you're introduced to the person that you're trying to get an interview with. And so grammatical errors and things of that nature, just really looking through your resume and doing a really thorough job of, does this resume speak for me in ways that I am going to be able to back up when I get in front of the person who's actually reading that information. So what I would encourage you to do is under promise and over deliver. And so when you're in front of someone and you're trying to sell yourself, don't sell yourself short, but actually don't say things that you're not able to do. And then when asked to do that on the job, or even sort of, I know in some instances, like we do checkoffs, people will ask you to do things in interviews. And if you said that you know how to do these things and then you don't, then you really, you don't present yourself in the best light for the employer. So again, be concise in your communication. Just think about how you can drill down. Multiple pages are never helpful. So if you can synthesize the information and your experiences into maybe a page and a half at max, of just really, this is who I am and this is what I represent. Because if I'm honest, as an employer interviewing candidates, you don't have a lot of time to be wading through 4 and 5 pages of information. So you really want to look at the pertinent positives, the most relevant job experiences that you've had that are pertinent to the job that you're applying for. And then how do you synthesize that information and package it in such a way that before you get in front of the employer, you've already presented yourself in a polished manner, in a professional manner, so that they actually take you as an interviewee serious.
And I want to also piggyback on the grammatical errors. Like, there are some things that are just back to the basics. That's not even about nursing school, just interviewing period. You know, be on time to your interview. I know it sounds so simple, but just being on time. In fact, arrive 10 minutes early so you can just calm down and like gather your thoughts and make sure, you know, adjust your tie or whatever you need to do. You know, dress appropriately for an interview. You would be surprised how many interview panels I've been on and people are not, it gives off a sense of, I'm not taking this seriously. So dressing appropriately for an interview, coming with questions for the company, you know, for the employer, because they want to know where your mindset is as well. So, I mean, just some of the most basic things about interviewing, even if you weren't in the field of nursing, don't lose the basics. You know, if you have resume paper, print your resume on resume paper. That it's an extra step that shows, hey, I'm taking this seriously and this is really important to me. And an extra tip, you know, just if you send a quick thank you, even an email afterwards. But you don't have to follow all of the, you know, you don't have to follow etiquette to a T. But it is a red flag to employers if they feel that you aren't taking the process seriously. So those small things that, you know, may be trivial in other situations, it really goes the extra mile in this situation when they're comparing you with other candidates.
Those are awesome points. And coming from having interviewed someone in the recent past or for a position, it was really interesting. I'm finding with certain graduates who really don't do those things. They don't show up on time. And they also want to have a very limited scope. And I'm not saying, again, to Ace's point, we don't promise the moon that we can't deliver. I'm not advising that, but I'm an F&P. And so, you know, cradle to grave is the exception, or expectation, not the exception. And I've found recently in the past 5 years that some people just decide they don't want to do something, and that's fine. But in a family practice setting, that can be a really big turnoff, kind of like not, you know, so it's interesting what's out there. Go with confidence and definitely be aware of these points. I think the next question that would be helpful is discussing some regional deals. So if you're moving after graduation, if you're moving in life to another city, how do you network? And then also, how do you find information about salary in that region and specialty?
Yeah, I can start with that. So again, that's where I start with the cover letter. If you're applying for a position, in that cover letter, 1 or 2 sentences explains what you're looking to do. As a recruiter, I tap into local associations, nurse practitioner associations, schools, universities. I might tap into their alumni boards as well when I'm searching for candidates in a specific area. So again, it's all about that networking piece as well as it relates to, just trying to connect. I mean, you can connect with just about anyone now online. And I remember when I was looking for a job once, just moving from one state to another, I just sent an email to the HR SHRM website, or the local SHRM association, and I got connected to a number of people. So same thing with nurses and nurse practitioners. You can definitely tap into those resources that are local, and then also find out more about salary information and such. But of course, like Career Builder, Indeed, Glassdoor, they do have salary information in those websites. I actually looked at it again today just to make sure. And they do, and you can put in the zip code, and you can put in the specialty, you can put in the title and find salary information. It's an aggregate salary information. So don't be surprised if you do get with a company and then it's not quite the salary, because they're all, they have budgets to work within, but it will at least give you an idea of what to expect based on your experience.
And I would say, if you're thinking about relocating to a different state, obviously you want to get with the alumni association there at the school and find out if there are actually alums in that area. And in particular, if there's someone who is in your specialty with whom you can reach out to and have a conversation with. In terms of salary, I think that my approach to salary may be a bit unconventional. I do look at the salary wizards and the Glassdoor, but one of the most important things about me is understanding my own value proposition. And sometimes I don't think that, you want to do a market analysis and you want to understand what the market might be yielding in that area. But again, going back to, in addition to your nursing skills and the things that you're bringing to bear, you may want to say, okay, in addition to my nursing experience, I'm also bringing this to the table. And so don't leave, especially if you are transitioning from one profession to another, you don't want to leave those experiences on the table and sort of the subsequent salaries that may be attached to that. So you want to kind of think about the body of your work and not just kind of where you are if you've had experiences in the past, and just kind of bringing all of those things to bear. But again, you want to know the market. You want to know that if you don't have any experience, then when you're looking at the salaries in aggregate, don't go to the top end. You don't want to try to go to, if there's $150,000 and this person has 10 to 12 years of experience, you don't fall into that category. You may not want to ask for that salary, but sort of find where you are in that skill set, but then don't be afraid to ask and negotiate. And I think we'll talk about negotiations later, but you present a number, the employer presents another number, and the goal is to really meet somewhere in the middle and try to find what is comparable to what you feel is appropriate for your skill set, but then also working with the employer to kind of find where they're able to give or where they're not. And so don't be afraid to ask. And also just network. I think that, one of the things that, like, you've gone to an amazing school that has a wide swath of alumni across the country. And so I would imagine that if any state that you're thinking about, that there's an alumni that's either in your specialty or in another specialty that may be able to give you some information about that particular region. So that would be my take on that question.
Yeah, as far as salary, I did start by looking on Indeed and other employment boards such as like Indeed, Glassdoor, places like that, to just get an idea. One of the biggest mistakes I made as a new graduate is not doing, as Asa mentioned, which is knowing your worth. And many times you're in a rush to get a job that you kind of undersell yourself and you settle on something that really you are worth way more than that. And your employer, the employer knows your worth, okay? They just want to know if you know your worth and if you're willing to negotiate for it. So a good starting point is to look at places like Indeed or boards like that to get an idea, but you really should know your worth before you walk in to an interview, so you can have an idea of what you want to get, what you would like to be paid for your work. Another interesting place that you might consider looking at salary options in certain regions is, I'm in a Facebook group, Women's Health MP Facebook group, and they have an aggregate of like different salaries in different regions across the US. So it doesn't have to be on an Indeed board. There are some Facebook groups in certain specialties you might be willing to join. It's a very informal way to do so, but it does give you an idea of like, hey, you know, this is an actual MP in California who makes, you know, 95K. So you have an idea of like, okay, that's a reasonable thing for something in that area. So it doesn't always have to be a structured way to find it. Think about some more creative ways to get an idea of what you're looking for. As far as networking, like Asa mentioned as well, Vanderbilt students are all over the United States. You know, there are people who graduated my program in 2013 who live in Alaska, you know, so we're all over the place. So reach out to your colleagues. The people that you went through this program with are the same ones that will help you identify someone in the area to help you link up and find positions that you need. Now, does that always work? No, I'll be honest, it doesn't always work, but it is a good starting point. And you would be surprised, not only do you rely on them just to establish a job, get established in a certain area, you may rely on them to, you know, quick clinical questions like, hey, what have you done in situations like this? So it's not just to find a job, it's to build a community in your area, you know, build the community of colleagues. Once you graduate, make sure that you keep those connections, because you can reach out to someone at any point in time. And networking isn't also just your colleagues. I live for reaching out to your directors of your program. So Jenny Moore is the director currently of the Women's Health Program at Vanderbilt, and she is a wealth of information. You know, she hears about positions. Alumni might reach out to her first and say, hey, there might be a position here. And she'll let, you know, the students know, hey, this is something that you might, if you're interested in and you're willing to move into this area, to consider that. So networking isn't just your peers, it is also some of our preceptors, our directors. So make sure you stay in contact with your team, because this is now your nurse practitioner family.
Excellent. And key things, and I really appreciate the emphasis on the Vanderbilt graduate aspects, because I've moved twice since leaving Nashville, and both times I've been involved in a local chapter, and both times I've had some relationship with Vanderbilt alum. One helped me get an interview where I live now. So that's a really great way to do it. And I would say we're going to give you more resources on that at the end. So please stick around. I would like to kind of transition a little bit to some questions we've gotten from graduates who are here asking about a couple of things. So I thought this was great. Do you have advice for anybody or someone who's decided they're going to re-enter the workforce as a nurse practitioner after taking several years off? Getting your foot in the door, explaining gaps in your resume, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I would say, just again, I mean, it's being prepared to explain. I mean, for me, when I'm reviewing resumes and looking at someone who has a gap in employment, if they just give me a good explanation, I document that, and that's how I present them. I mean, it's unfortunately, I mean, not to be sexist or anything, but a lot of women take time off to take care of their families. So, and that's, to me, that's understandable. And sometimes they give me too much detail, but I usually will put, you know, took some time off to take care of their family, and that's it. And then I still present them as a, you know, because it's, I mean, for a lot of clinical work, I mean, you don't lose it. You really don't lose it. And a lot of times people, although they may not have a full-time position, they may do volunteer work, or they may do PRN work here and there, you know, to keep their skills up. Obviously, they need to keep their license up and their their CMEs and such. So they're still learning. They don't ever really take a break from it. So when people take some time off, I look at them as, yes, you had the opportunity to do that, and now you're ready to come back to work, and we would be happy to have you back, or have you back in the workforce. And I had an MP that worked for a number of years, took 2 years off to travel. I mean, literally, she went to every single national park in the country. And I interviewed her for a position, and we ended up hiring her after, she was ready to come back to work. And it was awesome that she got that opportunity, and seeing, like Asa said, in terms of those other skills, like someone having the tenacity to go out and explore the country like that, and then come back. I mean, imagine the wealth of information and the diverse experiences they had, and then they bring that to your organization. That was exciting for me to present someone like that, and we ended up hiring them. So definitely, don't feel like it's a negative thing, because you have a skill set, you work for it, you have the education. Yeah, it always stays with you. And like, if you have a recruiter like me, I look at someone from every angle, and bring that to my manager's attention.
I agree. I don't think that having a gap in employment is necessarily a negative. It's if you can explain why you were not working during that period, and if you can, explain how you have remained up to date in your field. Most employers, I would like to say that now our society has become more progressive in that respect, that we understand that people are dynamic. We're not looking for robots who just went to school and went to work, and we're not looking for robots. We're looking for human beings. We're looking for dynamic people in positions. So it's not, I would not, to whomever is worried about that, I would not. Most employers are usually understanding, as long as it can be explained reasonably, and that you can just show that you have maintained your certifications and are up to date in your field, or how you plan to become up to date in your field, and refresh your skills.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add beyond that. I just think that in the field of nursing where we are now, you never stop being a nurse. And so I think that that's one of the beauties of a profession like nursing, is that you are always looking at how do you give your life away in the service of other people. And so one of the things that I've hired nurses that have been out of the field for 2 to 3 years, but they've kept their relevant skill set, and they've done the CME necessary for recertification, because that's a necessary step. So you can't just say, I want to re-enter the workforce, having had long periods of time where you haven't engaged in that profession, without having the necessary credentials for re-credentialing, or getting your license reinstated. So you've done the necessary work, and I think one of the things that is important to keep in mind is, what have you done with your time? And if you can account for that, if it's volunteerism, as it's been said, or if there are other things that you've done in addition to your nursing, then bring that up, because I think that may enrich the clinical experience for both yourself and the employer that you're trying to engage with.
These are amazing. And I think we all know life can go in so many directions. So I think this could be any of us in so many ways. And I think one other thing I was going to mention is, on LinkedIn, I was recently on a profile, and this person had actually put the amount of money that they saved from taking this large amount of time off and doing these other tasks for their family, for example. And it was probably the most professional way I've seen it, but it really was shocking how much she could compensate for. And it's not always about that, but I would just say those things that you've done, those really matter. And I think it's wise to quantify that as best you can in your way. I would like to kind of transition. We have the best questions, and so I apologize that we will not get to all of them, but I want to go ahead and transition to kind of the new grad, getting out there, getting our feet wet for that first job. So I've had some great questions this evening come in, and I kind of want to combine them. So, right now the job boards can be, all over the place, and it's kind of an interesting first time to to jump in. And so one question was about, how do you deal with the applications, or when you apply to a job that you are new, but it asks for you to have experience? This will be about a 2-part question. And then next, how do you find mentorship in that first position? And is there any expected onboarding? You know, are most new jobs giving you 3 weeks of orientation and letting you fly, or do you get a longer orientation? So that's a loaded question, but I think it's several important ones. So whoever wants to take a bat at it, go for it.
I think I'll talk about it initially. If they're asking for MP experience, then that's what they're asking for. So, I mean, unless you are able to get a conversation with someone within the organization, and I'll speak from personal experience. So the job that I was able to secure out of Vanderbilt was actually me calling into the company that I wanted to work for. They had a posting for a psychiatrist and not a nurse practitioner. And so in my hubris as a graduate of Vanderbilt, I said to them, you want to hire me for this position, and here are the reasons why. And so I sold myself to the company. The HR recruiter at the time took my call, and she took me seriously in that conversation. And so there was no job posted for a psychiatric nurse practitioner. It was actually for a psychiatrist. And so I knew that the experiences and the clinical training that I had garnered at Vanderbilt was equal, if not superior in some cases, to residents who were coming out of residency. And so I didn't think of myself as any less than any other person that they would be sitting in front of to given an opportunity for a job. So I called them with no NP experience. I think they were asking for a psychiatrist with at least 5 years of experience. And so I got the interview, and once I got to the table, I was able to talk to them, and I sold myself as someone who doesn't know all of the ins and outs of psychiatry, but I'm willing to learn, and I want to be an agent of change and represent the organization well. And they took me up on that. And then a year and a half later, they promoted me, the only advanced practice nurse within the organization that became a medical director supervising physicians in that organization. And so again, knowing your worth, and I think that's the whole purpose of this conversation, is knowing the value that you bring to the table and not being afraid to articulate your experiences true to form for who you are and what you bring to the table, and not being afraid to hear no. I was not afraid for them to say absolutely not. But what I wasn't going to do was just shrink back because they had a posting for a psychiatrist and I didn't think I was qualified for that job. No, I said, I'm going to apply for it. And once I get the conversation started, I think that they will see the value in me as a clinician. And sure enough, they did. And they brought me onto the organization. And that has subsequently changed the trajectory of my entire career. So now I can apply for director level positions inside of hospital systems because I took that initial first step in selling myself as a director level candidate, because of the experiences that I had in information technology and marrying those things with my clinical expertise from Vanderbilt. Now I'm one of the only nurse practitioners inside of Prisma that holds a director level position. And it all started because I saw a job that I enjoyed with a population that I loved and a city that I wanted to live in, and I went for it. And so now, like I said, it changed the whole trajectory of my career.
I would like to also mention, I don't know how many women's health MPs we have listening in today, but I guess it translates across specialties. But as a women's health MP, fresh out of school, I didn't just look for, I know a lot of jobs say you need experience. So my very first job, I applied to an OBGYN practice that was really looking for an FNP. And they were looking for someone who had experience. Well, I said, well, hey, I know how to do these skills that they're looking for. I read the description, and that's so vital because they give you the information as to what they're looking for in the description of the job. And you might say, if you look at just the blurb, you might say, oh, I'm not qualified, I'm underqualified, I don't have enough experience. Read the description, because you have the skill set already. And I can't reiterate this enough. Vanderbilt has prepared you. You are prepared, okay? That, like, the end, you're prepared. So make sure you read the description, because you might have the skill set that they're actually looking for, but they don't know that that's what they're looking for. They're saying they need experience because they think that means you have that skill set. So I applied to the position, and I worked there for a year, and it was great. It was an awesome job. And when I left that job, I talked to my supervising physician there, and he was just like, I love women's health NPs. That's, now I'm going to actually be intentional about looking for women's health NPs. So experience is just a term. You might have the skill set that they're looking for to translate those skills. So don't discredit that. Now, if it does say, I'm looking for a women's health NP with 10 years of experience, okay, well then that's completely different. There's context there. As far as onboarding and orientation, that is something. So when you go for an interview, it's just as important for you to lay out your expectations for the employer as it is for the employer to tell you what they're looking for. So when I went to my first interview, I let them know, like, hey, I am a new nurse practitioner. I mean, things like billing and where's the equipment in a room, all of those things I need to get adjusted to. Would it be okay if I took 2 weeks or 3 weeks and saw a reduced number of patients? Or the first week with my supervising physician, I just followed him for 1 week just to get an idea, the culture of the practice, just so I can have a clearer understanding. And then you can negotiate, like, hey, is it okay if I have a reduced schedule, just to start off with 5 patients for 1 week or 10 patients for 1 week until you can get to the level of productivity that they're looking for. So ask if you feel like you need that extra, push, you need someone to help support you and help you get established. Ask for that, because just as much as it's red flags and people who are coming from the interviews, they're red flags in employers too. If they are just like, hey, I need someone here and I'm going to be across town and you'll never see me, and I have a pager from 1990 and that's how you'll get in contact with me, then that's not what you need as a new NP, that would be concerning. So if you need some hands-on direct, experience with your supervising physician or with the team or whomever, say that in their interview. And if they say no and you don't feel comfortable, then that's completely okay. Then that just wasn't the position for you. You need to find your way, your route into practice that makes you feel comfortable and competent at the same time, and that they are supportive of your growth as a nurse practitioner as well.
And I will add to that some organizations will give you a reduced schedule, 50% of panel, and then go up from 50% to 75, and I think so on and so forth. And then also I think the part of that question was peer or mentorship. And so I know that the organization that I currently work for and Unity Healthcare, we had a buddy system for all new grads. And so for the first year of practice, you were paired with someone within that practice that would walk you through understanding CDC guidelines, clinical guidelines, where things were in the city, what sort of resources you needed to address social determinants of health, housing, infrastructure, transportation, all of those things. And so that takes time. And so you're not only just treating the patient when they're in the room, but you're thinking about them from a biopsychosocial model of care. And that really just takes time. And so I'm sure that you guys are familiar with the literature from novice to expert. So again, these are things that just, when you're thinking about entering into the practice world, you're not expected to be an expert at the outset of your job. And so you just have to give yourself that grace. And as Arterial said earlier, is that you have to interview the employer as well. So if they're not going to give you the space that you need to develop as a family nurse practitioner, psych nurse practitioner, or a women's health, then that may not be the organization that you need to hang your hat, right? You might want to think about, what are the things that I need from a resource perspective? Are they able to give me that as an organization? And if so, that's going to bode well for you to grow as a nurse practitioner. And then moving forward in your subsequent opportunities, you'll be the better for it because you've been given the room and the space to grow and to develop your expertise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to say too that the orientation period in most cases, at least in our organization, isn't cut and dry. So it's not going to say, oh, in a month or 2 months, you're going to be set free to work independently. So a lot of times what we're doing is making sure that not only are you comfortable, but we're comfortable with leaving you to work independently as well. And that's going to be proven through, again, being paired with someone that will support you and guide you in the operations of our sites. Now, our sites are a little more specific because we're dealing with specifically employee health. So it's a little different, but in other places where I have worked, again, we took the time to really guide those new nurse practitioners and make sure that they were truly comfortable with changing their mindset as it relates to now, hey, I'm making these decisions about someone's clinical outcomes and treatments versus, oh, I'm following someone else's lead. So as Interior pointed out, definitely you want to speak to what your limitations are and what your needs are and what you need from the employer, because that's the only way that, as an employer, we're going to know for sure how to guide you and put you in the right directions as it relates to your, your clinical experience. And ultimately, if they're hiring you as a new graduate, they want you to succeed. They want to, in most cases, when I was hiring new graduates, the manager says, yeah, I want a new graduate because now I can mold them to the way that we want them to behave versus, unlearning skills that they had from a previous employer or something like that. So, you guys bring up good points as it relates to definitely communicating, definitely, speaking up as to what you require, and again, interviewing the employer for sure and asking questions about, what are the clinical expectations. I get that all the time. Like, how many patients am I seeing? What's the expectation? But our company is a little different because we're not focused on volume versus quality. We want to spend time with the employees that we treat, and we want to make sure that they receive like a high quality healthcare service versus just, running people through every 15 minutes. So it's a little different environment working in employee health. And true, we look for a specific skill set, but in some cases we do have the capacity to bring on new graduates. And when we do post a position, through premishealth.com, we will list, if we have the capacity to bring on a new graduate, we will list that in the job posting as well. So, just definitely want to read through the job description and understand truly what the company's looking for. So.
Invaluable wisdom. I appreciate everyone's perspective. It is so rich, and I wish we had hours of this. Sadly, our time is coming to an end, but I want to turn it over to two other key parts of this evening. One is Betsy Usher, and she's really going to tell us more about connecting outside as we move out of Nashville or want to network job-wise further. So I'm going to turn it over to Betsy now.
Thank you, Hannah. You all, this was amazing. I really hate to see this come to an end. I am our alumni director at the School of Nursing, but I'm also a Vanderbilt graduate, and programs like this just really drive home how amazing our alumni are and how well connected of a community that we have. So, and also how powerful that Vanderbilt degree is. So I appreciate very much listening tonight, and for all the people who attended. I wanted to tell you about two resources and then two events that are coming up, and then turn it over to Joni Jeanette, who's going to tell us about the new mentoring program that the Alumni Board is starting, and that's very exciting. So I'll be quick, but some of the people talked tonight about resources at Vanderbilt. One of them is VU Connect. We're going to put information about this in the chat, but VU Connect is a database of all Vanderbilt graduates from all different schools at Vanderbilt. And it's a great way to connect with people, not just nurses. So if you would like some information from the perspective of a nurse or a nursing student on how to best use the database, feel free to email me. My address is going to be in the chat, or you see my name. It's my email address is betsy.usher@vanderbilt.edu. And I will send you some information about how best to use that database, because there's a wealth of information in there that you can connect with other people. Secondly, we talked a little bit about chapters. There are chapters all over the country of Vanderbilt alums, and you can also access that through VU Connect. If you live in a place where there is no chapter, feel free to start one. I mean, that would be wonderful to have our nursing graduates starting chapters. And there might be a chapter, if you're thinking about moving to another area, I could suggest going ahead and connecting with the folks who are in that location so you can start making some connections. Now let's see, I wanted to talk about two events coming up. One is the alumni office next Wednesday is hosting a panel of alumni, excuse me, I'm excited, about Black Americans in mental health. And ASA is on that panel, so we know it's going to be a really good one. We've sent out some information by email and it's on our social media sites, but we will be sending that out again. So hopefully you all will register for that. It's going to be a really good evening. And then this Know Your Value series is something that our alumni board puts on, this event like tonight. The DNPs are going to be doing one on March 22nd, and that one is about serving on boards and the value of alumni and students getting involved in professional organizations and also corporate boards as well. So hopefully you'll keep an eye out for that and will join us. So again, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, panelists. And Joni is the chair of tonight's event. So I'm going to turn it over to her so she can talk about the mentoring program. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited about the participation of tonight. I know that you all got some very, very rich material. And thank you, Betsy, for all your work and behind the scenes with this. And Sarah and Allie, and also Hannah for facilitating it. You did a great job. Also the panelists, I learned things. I wish, I'd had this when I went to Vanderbilt as a master's student. So thank you so much for taking the time. I do want to tell you about one other, excuse me, one other event that the alumni board is putting on that's new this year. And it is a mentoring program that we are kicking off in the next month or so. And so please be looking for more email information about it. We are trying to match up mentors with mentees that are alumni and to be able to help the students navigate through anything. Actually, there was a question about that on the chat box, so I was real excited to be able to tell you about that. So that again is going to be kicking off in the next month or so. So please keep an eye out for that. And with that, thank you again for participating. I know a lot of you are spread out throughout the country, so you're probably very, very cold in some parts and very warm in others. So please stay safe, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.